Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. You are listening to episode number 53. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here as always with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, how you doing today?
I'm in a good mood. I thought we were going to be excited talking about the Brewers, which we are, and then we get huge Bucks news the day of when we're recording. So we finally get to talk about the Brewers and the show, at least. I know you've been talking a lot of Brewers in a lot of different places, but um, I was sort of breaking through here and talking about the Brewers finally. But now I'm just thinking about Gary Trent and the Bucks. But I will clutch up here and talk about the Brewers with my best of my ability. But how you doing, Spencer?
Doing well. Definitely it's been a long 3 days for me with the draft going on, but a lot of good stuff. And like you said, the Bucks signing Gary Trent certainly did not help or hurt the spirits, I should say. And yeah, it's been a fun 3 days. Definitely an exhausting one, or definitely an exhausting stretch. And it's going to be, I'm going to be tired during this. And as you can already tell, I'm fumbling my words quite a bit early on here. So hopefully I catch my stride as we get going, but I'm doing all right. Before we get going, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on. Rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And Gunner already talked about it, but today is going to be focused on the Brewers. It's the All-Star break. We don't have a ton to talk about in terms of the games, but we'll touch on, well, what are we going to touch on, Gunner?
Thank you for the transition there, but yeah, we're not going to go in depth on these last 10 or so games before the All-Star break, but we all know that wasn't a great stretch for the Brewers, so we'll talk about what that all means and how we're feeling going into this All-Star break with the All-Star game tonight and all that. And then obviously what's the biggest thing that happened this weekend is why Spencer has lazy eyes today and bleeding out of his ears probably is from MLB draft review stuff, and we'll be talking about that, all the picks that the Brewers made. My thoughts on a couple of them. We all know that Spencer went very hard and put the work in, and he knows a lot about these guys already. So we'll get his thoughts. And then obviously just our questions for the crew, and that'll just sort of encapsulate a lot of stuff that we're going to be covering too. So a lot of different topics there. But to start out, Spencer, like I said, we did play some games. The Brewers did before the All-Star break, obviously, and we did not play them very well. We sort of limped into the break here. We lost 7 of 10 games. The bullpen looked gassed. Honestly, this the team in general seemed a little bit gassed to me too. I think even Pat Murphy had a quote out there that just said, "Guys look tired right now," which no excuse, obviously, when you're an MLB team and you're in first place, and you know you can make all the excuses in the world, but this team did look tired, and that's reality. But I guess given the team slide and just the overall performance going into the All-Star break. Whether it's just performance, maybe that's record wise, whatever the case may be. Is there anything to really worry about with this team going into the quote unquote second half? Obviously, a little bit less than that, but the home stretch of this season.
I don't think there's anything new to be worried about based on how this half ended. I mean, we have talked all season that the bullpen needs some help from the starters. They were bound to start wearing down a little bit as we really, this is a long stretch of baseball. This is the first time they're going to get a legitimately decent stretch of rest, which is going to be huge for them. They get to reset. I mean, a full week almost that's a reset for the entire bullpen. 5 days off, you just don't get that during the course of a season at any point. So in terms of the concerns, I mean, it was always going to be pitching for me more than anything else. I think the bats have maybe slumped more than I expected them to, just because guys like Contreras and Rhys Hoskins really haven't hit as well, especially of late, as you would have hoped. Um, Unfortunately, Willie Adames appeared to be getting back on track the last weekend right before the break, so he was probably not super thrilled to get this break because he seemed to be figuring some things out, and same with Sal Frelick. Honestly, he was really hitting well the last 10 games. While the team struggled, those two started putting some things together. Yeah, I'm not super concerned. I think the issues and the concerns or the potential problems that were always there are still there for the most part, but I don't see after those last 10 games anything that like jumps out as a new concern for me. So how about you, Gunner?
Yeah, I'm not worried at all. I think one, just team wise, I think this team's probably too talented to not succeed in the second half. Maybe they outperformed a little bit here and there, but now it just feels like we're just a good team right now. It all sort of evened out at this point. Um, the scary thing for me, if there is anything that's scary, is the fact that this team is young, um, mostly offensively. Obviously, then we got guys who I guess are stepping up too, pitching wise, who are young, but inexperienced when it comes to playoffs or just this type of when you're in first place. It feels like Brewers fans, we've been put through this ringer a lot when we're sitting here in first place, but not a huge lead, but not super comfortable, and then it ends up collapsing in the end. In some fashion, obviously, we win a lot when we go to the playoffs, but we always have these sort of scares. It's never easy going into the playoffs, but that's also this baseball too. You're not going to run away with the division all the time. Um, but I think the one encouraging thing too, which we'll maybe talk about more towards the end of the podcast, but um, is for as many injuries as we've had so far this year, and a lot of them pitching wise, it feels like we're finally getting healthier too. Um, Ortiz is back. I know he just came back that last week. Mitchell's back. Whether you love him or not, it's another body to give guys rest or put guys in the carousel, if you want to call it that. Devin Williams started pitching when he came back with the Timber Rattlers, so he should be back in, I assume, this month at some point.
Should be.
DL Hall, same thing. We don't know what his role will be, but another arm where even if he's in the bullpen in a one inning role, that bumps somebody else on the bottom of the totem pole out of there. So things are turning around in that sense. It just feels like the perfect time really to have a break. But you also didn't really lose much as far as the standings go or whatever that may be. But the Cardinals are obviously creeping up. I don't want to talk about it too much because they scare me, but they're there. And it seems like every team in this division has a chance, which is also very scary. Like I could see the Cubs can make a run and not necessarily to our downfall, but they're just all good teams. So I think anything can really happen. But I like what position that we're in right now too. Like I said, it happened at a good time. Very Brewers like to have this happen around the All-Star break and everyone probably freaking out and oh my gosh, this team, this is the real team. We stink now, but um the Nationals, like they're a solid team too. They're usually bad, but they're solid. But you lose to tough competition that isn't that tough a competition at the wrong time, and everyone freaks out. But it's gonna happen. Like you said, we've been calling it all year long. There's gonna be a bad run at some point. That's what baseball is. So yeah, hopefully, keep in a good time. Guys get the break, we get healthier, and can turn it around. If this is just the team if this is our team going forward, I still feel pretty confident in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you, before the season, considering where a lot of people were at mentally with the Brewers coming into this year, you tell them they're going to be 55 and 42 at the All-Star break.
Oh yeah.
I don't think you'd get one complaint from anybody. Like, yes, it didn't finish super well, but it was a very, very good start to the season. It was a great quote unquote first half because MLB does not understand fractions whatsoever, but it's been 97 games and you've got a 567 win percentage. Your run differential is very solid, which means for the most part,
Mhm.
it's not luck. You're playing to this type of record. In fact, by the numbers, the Pythagorean record would be 57 and 40. So most years the Brewers overperform that. This year they're slightly underperforming, but they're basically playing in line with what they're doing overall. You should feel pretty good about this being 4.5 up at the All-Star break. Like Gunnar said, I mean, 8.5 back. The Cubs are 8.5 back. That's within reach. The Brewers were, I believe, 6 games back going into September against the Cubs in 2018, and were able to come back and win the division. So tons of time left, but the Brewers are the only team in the division who's got a winning record at home and away. They're the only team that kind of does well in any setting. They're set up to have a good second half as well. The pitching's going to be the concern. It's going to be something they have to figure out. Like Gunnar said, they're getting healthy again. They have the trade deadline coming up here soon. They can always add more like they did with Savali, who has looked pretty good in his couple of opportunities with the Brewers, I have to say. They'll figure it out. I'm pretty confident in that. Now, injuries, all that type of stuff could play a big factor. You never know what's going to happen. But I think if the Brewers are relatively healthy, they will be fine. You can never control another team just going crazy. And the Cardinals pretty much have done that for the last month or so. They've wildly outperformed their run differential this year. So by mathematical and logical sense, you would expect them to struggle a bit more the rest of the season, but it's the Cardinals. We know how the Cardinals operate. Devil magic's a thing. They just somehow find a way, and I'm never going to count them out whatsoever. So all five teams are in the playoff race right now. All five teams will likely be at least holding their roster, if not buying, at the deadline. So it'll be an exciting second half for the NL Central. I think the Brewers will be fine. But on to the thing that I spent the last like 72 hours fully entrenched in, and that's the draft. So I'm going to start it off quickly and just talk about we'll go day by day here. So day one, the Brewers' first round pick is Braylon Payne, a high schooler out of Texas, outfielder, very fast, very good defender. Gunner, you looked at some video. What are your thoughts on the swing?
Yeah, it's out of all of our hitters, not my favorite of the top three guys. Um, I think there's a lot of stuff there that's exciting. The fact that he's a young player too is it's hard to predict what his swing will look like. It's going to probably change a lot going in when you actually see him in a Brewers uniform. But I do like the simplicity of it. It seems like he knows his swing, he knows his approach. He's a fast guy. Maybe he with those guys, types of guys, I always point to like a Garrett Mitchell or a Sal Frelick. Like they just know themselves. They want to get on base. He guy stole a lot of bases. Maybe he wasn't trying to always hit it for a lot of power, but um, just in the video that I watched of him too, I didn't love. It seems like he's got a very, if you look at the path or just the where he slots his bat and where he launches from, it feels very down, and it's not a amazing path. But if he can clean that up, get stronger. Like I said, super, super good athlete. He's got tools there for sure. Um, I always have to give you my swing comps. I'll give you my swing comps and all three of these guys. That's at least the top three guys. Um, and I was telling you not to be super blown away by this one because I didn't love the swing, but I saw a lot of Jason Hayward in there. Obviously, Jason Hayward's not a great hitter. He's had some great moments. He for sure has. He just never really cleaned up his bat totally, but um, I think here with this pick, and I know you didn't ask me for my full thoughts on the pick first, but since you'll have a big time to talk about it, I know you have your thoughts on it, but
Go ahead, Gunner. You
it
can
was
talk.
shocking. It was shocking to me um, that we did take this guy at this spot. Now, I know there's reasons for that, and that's what I want you to talk about, those reasons maybe a little bit, but it feels like the Brewers can never really help themselves with a guy like this. Um, where super a lot of good tools, fast athlete. It feels like the floor, there's always going to be a safeness to this type of pick because of how just good of a overall player he is defensively and the tools that he brings outside of just straight up bat, which we're going to have a guy here next who we're going to talk about who seems like he's that. But again, there's other things that go into it, pool money, all that stuff, or maybe it makes some sense still in later in the draft why they did this. But um, in MLB drafts, I feel like they always just take guys that they like to, like, don't get blown away by somebody if he's ranked. He's not ranked in the top 20, so this is an awful pick. It could be an amazing pick by the end of it. It doesn't really mean much. They just liked him, and it made sense for the rest of the draft how it played out too. So I was definitely shocked when it happened. Again, I don't look into this stuff a lot more than you do, but I know looking at your guys that you had, and I had a couple that it seemed like they were maybe going to go a guy who was more ready with this pick, but they sort of did that and flipped it around to where there's maybe some they did that, but they not wasted, but used this first round pick in a different idea of that type of player because obviously being a high schooler, he's not going to be ready next year in the next couple of years. But um, we all know how stacked our outfielders are too, so it's totally fine that he's a young kid who can develop, and we won't see
Yeah.
him for a little bit here. So yeah, I mean, what did you think of his swing or just the pick in general? Because there was a shockness to the fact that he was our first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, just starting with, I'll start with the player himself. Like, defense is really good. The speed is plus plus, like 70 grade speed. Arm is fine, not great. So he's probably not a right fielder. So he's probably limited to left and center, but I think the defense will play in center and the speed obviously will. In terms of the bat, he made strides this year. So that was probably part of the Brewers' thinking is that they saw some uptick in his ability to actually impact the ball and turn on the ball a little bit more. I don't know which video you watched, so I can't really comment too much. It may have been new video, or it might have been a little bit older. He did, for the most part, improve on like generating a little bit of loft in his swing this year.
Hmm.
He was able to, he got a little less slappy. There was a little bit less of like that straight down approach angle that you were talking about
Hmm.
with the bat. So it may have been a little bit older that you were seeing, but either way, it's still in that realm. Like you can kind of see in terms of bat path, like a Sal Frelick thing going on once in a while, or Terang, those types of guys. Um, I think he's going to be able to hit for power. It's really going to matter if the thing that's going to matter most is whether he can get the ball out in front and whether he can actually get the ball in the air. He's already had decent exit velocities for he's 17. He won't be 18 for at least a month and a half, I believe. So he's one of the younger guys in the draft, and that goes into why the Brewers were interested in him too. They're a big model team, meaning they have all these different statistical things that they place into models, and age is a big factor in upping how well players tend to do by these models. So a 17-year-old at draft day is going to grade out better than an 18-year-old with the exact same set of tools. That's just how it works. So I think they went with, like you said, it's kind of a safe floor for a high schooler. If they can get him to get the ball in the air more often, which is not an uncommon thing we've said about Brewers picks. This is like you said, this is their type. They've had a lot of players kind of along this type of profile. If they can get it in the air more, I think he's going to impact the ball a little bit. I think the hit tool is going to come around. It got a lot better this year, like I said. It's it's a long journey for him. Like you're probably talking 2030 before you're actually seeing an impact here. But like Gunnar said, the Brewers have a lot of young outfielders already. If you're playing like the math here, that's around the time where a lot of these outfielders start to become not team controlled anymore. They might be free agents. They may get traded in their last year or two if they're performing. Obviously, that's going to play into this more than anything else. But you can kind of play the game of like, this is going to be part of that next wave if everything goes exactly how the Brewers want it to be. So I think that's part of why they did it. But I think the main reason they surprised everyone here is the pool money. And I'm imagining he's going to get a decent amount under slot, which basically how it works. Each draft pick for the first 10 rounds is assigned a slot value. Every team gets to pool all that money from each pick that they own through round 10. That's their entire pool of money to work with. Players are not forced to agree to that exact slot. It's not like the NBA or NFL draft where you get drafted in this spot, this is the money you get. They can pay you kind of whatever. Now, there are some qualifiers, including if you take a pre-draft physical, you're guaranteed, and you're a top 300 pick, you're guaranteed to get 75% offered to you of your slot value. So if that's the case with Burke and Payne, they may get more than I'm expecting. I have no idea if they did get physicals or not. Either way, the Brewers have about 12.5 million in slot money available to them. They can also go up to 5% over that. They have to pay a tax on that, and it's quite a bit to pay that overage tax without losing anything. If you go more than 5% over, you lose your first pick in the next draft. So last year, the Brewers were $25 away from going over 5% over. They know what they're doing. They know how to spread out the wealth on these slot values, and I more or less trust their plan here, which is why when they took Payne, did I love it? No. Was I going to complain a lot about it? No, because I trust that they're going to have a solid draft overall. And as we get into it a little bit deeper, I would say that I think they did. But we'll talk about the second guy, and we're not going to go this in depth. This is more just breaking down how everything works with this first pick, but we'll get quicker as we go here. Blake Burke, first baseman from Tennessee. This one I think is going to be an underslot. This one is not the same profile whatsoever. It is completely different. We're talking about a guy with 70 grade raw power, just huge, huge power. He's gotten to it in games. He hit balls over 480 feet at Tennessee last year. I think his hit tool's actually pretty decent. I don't think he's going to just be a power hitter. I think there's actual like bat to ball skills and a decent enough hit tool to hit like 250 if you're talking batting average here. Defense is questionable, and it's first base only for sure. I kind of compare him to like a Rowdy Tellez type at first, where I think he has really good hands, but he just isn't very athletic. So he's not going to get to much that isn't within reach, but he's going to pick stuff really well and he has better hands. So to me, that's like better than Reese Hoskins because I think Reese can't get to anything and he has bad hands. So at least he's got that to fall back on. No speed to speak of. It's a bat. And Gunnar, I know this swing you definitely liked quite a bit more. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I like to swing a lot here. Lefty swing, obviously, talked about how big he is. This super, super strong kid. Um, just has a really nice, strong base and really, really smooth. It's almost like I told you Ken Griffey Jr., but that's almost like, oh wow, that's like the greatest swing of all time. But it had that smoothness to it. It wasn't exactly that swing, obviously, but he just really, really knows how to keep balance and keep his power distributed equally. Super, super repeatable, great launch angle. Obviously, it's how he smashes balls all the time. Um, but yeah, I was also a little bit shocked here too. I mean, we take sort of the safe pick, obviously, with the first pick, and then this guy, as you explained, is almost the opposite of it's not scary because he's obviously a really good player, but it's like, okay, this guy's window is like he has to hit or he is not going to be valuable, probably. And he seems like he's going to hit because that's all he does is hit. But a little scary in that sense, but you think about like a Brock Wilken. I think Brock Wilken probably had even a better maybe hit. I mean, you could talk about his hitting profile too comparatively to him, but I think that's probably the biggest comparison for a guy this high in the draft recently for the type of hitter that he is. But um, he would pair well with a Brock Wilken too, like that, since we assume this guy is going to be a fast riser through the system being, I think he was 4 years at Tennessee or
Hmm.
wherever he was, right? So seems like he should be ready to go pretty soon. As long as he hits, obviously that's what he has to do. But yeah, I think there's always something to. I talk about this with Garrett Mitchell too, since I love him. But um, there's always something to guys where they go to big schools and like they're like the man there. That I think that's like the one intangible that I always point to sometimes is for us like playing. I was never that guy, obviously, but um, I think there's something to like that swagger, like the guy who thinks he's the man and he's like the power hitter at the big school. Like I believe in that a little bit more. Like he'll be a good major league player. Or he'll be good in the pros because of that. So I like the swing, obviously, just bare minimum. I didn't watch him in college, anything like that, but he's gonna have to hit like 100%. Otherwise, this is probably gonna be not a great pick. But this was, I guess, the one last tidbit I have for this. This was the Corbin Burns final piece of the trade, right? Or is that
Yeah.
the next pick? Yeah. So if you wanted to complete the trade tree, that's third guy now that we got for in the trade. So um, it's exciting in that sense too. Now we actually have a name to the face to the name now, I guess, for the pick, and now we know who we got for Corbin Burns. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm excited about it for sure.
Yeah, no, he's gonna have to mash. I mean, it's going to come down completely to whether he hits or not, and it's not just hits. Like he has to really, really hit because it's a first base only, maybe a DH if you get to that point. But if you're a DH only, then you have to hit even more than a first baseman. So I think he can. We'll see how it goes, but it's definitely a fun profile. He will probably hit some absolute nukes in the minors that will be fun to post and see and look at all the time. And hopefully, I mean, he struck out at a 14% clip this year. Like he has an ability to get the ball in play and take his walks and avoid strikeouts and hit for huge power. Like it's the type of offensive profile that can definitely hit. You can see like a Pete Alonso type of not obviously it's a totally different swing and it's totally they're not even the same handedness, but like that type of profile is what you're hoping for here in a guy like Burke. And just quickly along the lines of the Burns trade, I agree that is how it's always going to be looked at, that this is the guy who closed out that trade. I think it's important to note that the Brewers probably view it a little bit differently because they likely saved money on this pick, and they would argue that, oh, well, the money we saved using that pick and the money we gained in the draft slot
Right.
money in general helped us get so and so or whatever. But it's always going to be looked at as Burke being the last guy in this trade. So I get it, and I think it's fair. Um, yeah, I'll quickly talk about the other two picks on Sunday night. That was day one. Bryce Message, which is not how you would think it's pronounced, but it is pronounced like message. Right-handed pitcher from New Jersey. Both of the two picks are right-handed pitchers from New Jersey high schools. Chris Livonis being the other one. Message is kind of in that 92 to 94 range with his fastball. He's been up to 98. He gives me big time Josh Noth comparisons from last year's draft. Big fan. He's got two different breaking balls, and he learned a different changeup last year. Tread Athletics actually posted about it today. I retweeted it and talked about it a little bit more, but he learned a kick change from then that has a ton of movement. He hasn't totally learned how to dial it in command wise, but it's a really good addition as a fourth pitch for him. Just a big fan of Message. Think he's a guy who is the safer of the two picks between him and Livonis. But Livonis, well, I should say this. Message is a Virginia commit. My guess is anybody drafted day one or day two for the Brewers will sign, but it probably won't be cheap. He's going to be an overslot signing. That's part of the reason they wanted to save money early on here. Same with Chris Livonis, Wake Forest commit, so that can always be a tough one to sign pitchers, especially away from, because they are known for their pitcher development over there. But Livonis got up to 98 this spring. For him, though, the big thing is it's the metrics and the spin for him. So he's only 175 pounds. He's got room to add more, quite a bit more mass. I think he's going to be a guy who can throw close to triple digits at his peak. He's got a very, very athletic delivery. His fastball shape is pretty good, up to 17 inches of induced vertical break, 10 inches of run. So a good shape. 2,500 RPMs on the spin for a fastball is very, very good. Helps it play up even above the normal shape. But the big thing for him are the secondaries. So he throws a sweeper. It's a good pitch. It's not great, but it's around 82 miles per hour on average. It gets over 13 inches of sweep. He throws a cutter that plays really well to lefties. We know the Brewers love cutters. They love guys with multiple fastballs. He can throw it arm side, and he can also get it glove side, which is impressive for a high schooler. And then he also has a pretty big curveball that he's learning to command better, but it's gotten up to 2,900 RPMs. It's gotten close to 3,000 a couple times. A lot of movement, a lot of sweep as well, almost as much as the sweeper, but a lot more vertical break as well. That one sits in the mid 70s. His changeup, he doesn't throw it a ton, but it's got a decent shape. He kills the spin well off of it. He takes velocity off of it pretty well. He's got a weird slot to try and throw a changeup from with his low release, but just for me, like, this is the type of clay that the Brewers do super well with and mold really well. So for their development team, this is exactly what they're looking for. I think he's going to gain some weight. I think he's probably going to clean up the mechanics a little bit, but he's going to be fun. For me, he was my favorite of the 4 day one picks, just because I think ceiling wise, nobody else is going to get super close to it. But I think Message is the safer high school pick and also has quite a bit of a ceiling as well. So those two are the ones that excited me the most. I think Burke has the chance to be like the safest, most likely to actually impact a major league team at some point, just because as long as he does hit, if he hits anywhere near what he's capable of, like, he's a middle of the order hitter for the Brewers, probably by 2026 at the latest. Like, that's the type of movement you could see from him. So it was a fun day one. It was actually, like, after a weird start, I was pretty happy with how day one went. Moving to day two, though, it got a little weird for what I was expecting. I was expecting more prep players, more high schoolers. And they started it off with actually a guy I tweeted about before the draft started, and he's one of my guys. Like, I loved Jaron DeBerry. He was their 3rd round pick here. Dallas Baptist, not ranked super high on a lot of lists, but to me, he's like the prototypical Brewers pitcher. And he's got 6 legitimate 6-pitch mix. He's got all 3 fastballs, 4-seam, sinker, and cutter. Brewers love that. His sweeper is nasty. It's a really, really good pitch. Super high spin. He throws a changeup. He throws a curveball. He's got kind of everything you're looking for in a Brewers starter. I think he's going to add velocity. He's another guy who's really slight, not very big. And I don't know that he's getting the most out of his delivery right now, but solid command as well. Like, he, to me, is going to be one of those guys that teams are not surprised by the Brewers picking him, and not surprised when he kind of just has a really solid move through the system and a solid career long term. That'll bring us to another hitter, though, and one of the only other hitters the Brewers took in this entire draft. That is Marco Dingus. They drafted him as a catcher out of Florida State. Um, Previously at a junior college, which we know the Brewers love their JUCO players in general. Dingus has a really cool story, um, scary story as well, too. He was less than a year ago, about a year ago, I should say. He was hospitalized for almost 6 weeks with a disease known as HLH. I guess I shouldn't say a disease. It was an immune deficiency disorder. It's very rare and it's pretty devastating. Adam McKelvey wrote a really good story about it. But for 43 days, Dingus was between two different hospitals. His fever was well over 100 for the entire time. This disorder can result in multiple organ failures and death. So this was a really, really scary thing for him. This was only a year ago, and he was able to fight through all of that. He was able to make it to Florida State. He hadn't played at Florida State yet. He was coming from this JUCO, and the coach was still willing to give him a chance, which is, I got to give them credit for that because there was probably a lot of unknowns going into that. And Din just kind of said, it just gave me a lot of appreciation for the sport and everything. Like he said, you just show up thankful to be at practice every day. You show up thankful to be with all the guys and thankful to play the sport because you never know, he says, or at least I didn't know if tomorrow I would wake up. So a cool story. But beyond that, a talented player. So Gunnar, why don't you talk a little bit about his swing as well?
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a sad story, but an awesome one, and you're just happy that, happy for him, happy he gets the opportunity. Um, I'm glad you pronounced his name first because I was going to pronounce it Dinkus if it got
I
tossed to
looked
me,
it up.
and
I watched some video to make sure I got it right earlier.
so I definitely don't want to disrespect him now since after that story. But I'll make him really happy here because I think his swing was actually my favorite out of the top three guys that I've gotten after looking at it more today even. Um, Gives me some Luke Voigt, Trevor Story type vibes to it, but just has the best plane and launch position that you could have. Great separation with the shoulders and hips that I saw. Um, just really, really easy, compact swing, but super aggressive and powerful at the same time. So it feels really repeatable. And those are the swings that I like the most, honestly. But you could tell what I was gonna say was that you could tell that he's strong, but he doesn't have a very strong like build to him.
Hmm.
But it's crazy now with that story combined with that, how that was my first opinion of him watching him this last season with his highlights. But knowing that was actually his backstory too, that's just really incredible. So maybe he can get even stronger then, and that just builds on to what he's already got going for him. But I think just the compactness, I think it's all that what he plays catcher and outfield. I mean, do you think that he'll stick at catcher mostly? I mean, usually when
So
these guys hit, you would assume they go to outfield if they're pretty good hitters, but you never know.
yeah, so he didn't play any catcher for the
Yeah.
for Florida State. He mostly DH'd, and I think that was partially because he was just not in the shape that you would normally have been in
Yeah.
because of what he went through. He did play outfield when he was at the community college. He did catch a little bit. The Brewers have this thing where they draft somebody who they think can maybe catch a little bit, and they have him catch, and they say if we can actually get him to be a decent catcher because they like the bat already for all these guys. If he can catch, his value goes up exponentially. Like
Oh yeah.
that's the as big of like other than shortstop and probably more than shortstop. If you can be a good defensive catcher that can hit, you have a ton of value to any organization. And yeah, I think they're gonna try it. Like you said, he's a good athlete and he wants to do it, is what the article I read earlier today said. So somebody who clearly has the mental toughness to deal with a lot of stuff and wants to
Mhm.
do something, I'm never going to rule it out. I have no idea if he can do it, but I think it's at least a possibility. And I do enjoy that the Brewers try this with guys. It never hurts anything. Like at worst, you just move them back to their position that you are more comfortable with, and you're fine. I think he could play outfield. I think he could probably move to first if you needed him to. I think he could play either of those spots and be fine. And if he catches, it would be fantastic. So that was a fun pick. I think the bat is really good. I was very excited when you loved the swing as well because I did. I don't know as much about it, but as soon as I saw it, it just looked really fluid, really nice, really on plane, like you said, just in a good spot all the time. So It looks simple, compact, something that you know is repeatable. To me, that's all I can ever see with my naked eye. It's like, oh yeah, I think he could do that anytime he wants to and be in the right spot. So, yeah, big fan of that pick. Then the
Is there
Brewers,
something, just for one last thing here
yeah,
before I know you're going to take it away with all the pitchers coming up
oh
too,
yeah,
so you'll have plenty of time to talk. But is there something with, he's obviously not old, but he's older, and we talked about that with Burke, that he's going to be a fast riser. It doesn't automatically mean you're going to be a fast riser just because you're 22 or whatever his age is, 21, 22, 23.
he's
Um,
younger for college actually, but yeah, keep going.
yeah. Um, do you expect him? What's his timeline going to look like? Because we mentioned the outfielders, catchers. You're always going to need a catcher, but I mean, most likely he'll end up in the outfield if it doesn't work out. But what does his timeline sort of look like? Because I think the bat might be ready, but yeah, I mean, age-wise, people get more concerned when you're older. You're not a high schooler with
Right.
progressing through the system, but
Yeah. I mean, I would guess partially due to him trying catcher, they're going to slow play it a little bit more than you normally would. Um, it's just there's going to be a learning curve there. My guess is he will head to the Arizona Complex League to learn that. Now, he will be 20 until September, it looks like. So,
yeah,
for a
yeah.
college guy, especially one with multiple years, like he's he's still got some time on his side, I would say. But either way, I would expect, I mean, probably 3 or 4 years if everything's going well for him. Like you said, I won't doubt the bat. I think there's a possibility it could move pretty quickly. It's just so interesting to me. I'm looking at his stats here, and in summer ball as an 18-year-old, he hit 1 homer and 90 plate appearances, and then he hit 15 at Florida State in 288. Like after this debilitating thing that he had to go through. Pretty impressive guy. Definitely somebody I'm gonna be rooting for, regardless of if it's going well at the time or not. Like this is a guy you want to do well. And yeah, I think it's a reasonably quick timeline if things are going well for him, but I don't think it's gonna be as quick as like a Burke where I if you told me Blake Burke hit in the Brewers lineup next year, like I wouldn't be surprised. Not on opening day, but at some point, like that wouldn't shock me. I'd be pretty shocked if Din just did. But yeah, I I really liked the college bats that they did take. Like you said, I think early in the draft I was expecting more of those, but they didn't go that route. And we'll talk about a bunch of pitchers here, so Gunner's gonna have to just sit and listen, I think. But I'm not gonna talk too much about a lot of these guys, mostly because there's just not that much info on a lot of these guys. Um, but we'll kick it off with John Hollabetz. He was at Old Dominion this year. He spent his first couple of seasons at Radford. Probably a Penn guy. I would guess he was a Penn guy at Old Dominion. His fastball's up to 95. It's not anything that's crazy. It's got decent characteristics. He throws from a low slot, which is a Brewers staple at this point. Slider is okay. I've seen totally mixed reviews on some people think his changeup could be his best pitch. Some people say the changeup is barely even there. So I don't know. Based on the little video I saw, it looked like a pretty good pitch to me. So I think that might be his best secondary, but it's probably a pen arm. Either way, it's going to be a very, very underslot signing, I would guess. Like potentially the minimum $10,000 bonus. That would not shock me if they got him for that or a little bit more. Chandler Welch out of Tulane, another guy even harder to find information on, but fortunately, he did throw in a Statcast stadium once last year, which meant TJ Stats posted he does a breakdown for like minor leaguers or major leaguers with their Statcast information. So we got a lot of data on Welch, actually. He throws 5 pitches. Again, shocker, not at all. Brewers love their guys with the kitchen sink. He throws a sinker with a decent amount of run. It's a like a fringy average pitch, I would say right now. His slider is what it's called on Statcast. It seems cutterish to me. And he's described as throwing a cutter, but there doesn't show one here. So I'm guessing he calls it a cutter. That's upper 80s. Works pretty well against lefties and righties. It's got good movement. He got a ton of whiffs on it in this one game that he had the Statcast for. He throws a sweeper at 77-ish. Uh, really good shape to that. Almost 20 inches of horizontal break and very little vertical break. So it's a straight frisbee slider, basically. Grades out really well on Stuff Plus. He throws a four seam with not great movement stuff, but he has -4 vertical approach angle, which is really good. Means it plays well up, even though the shape might not look great. It spins a lot and it has a really good approach angle, so it should play well. And then he throws an even slower curveball in like the upper 60s, low 70s. That one doesn't grade out super well, but it's got a lot of movement. It spins a decent amount. I think it'd be more of a like get me over, show him something else type of pitch. But yeah, 5 pitch mix, a guy that I had never heard of, which is I don't even mean that like I know a lot of these names when they pop up. I had never heard of Chandler Welch, and he's interesting. I will never doubt the Brewers on their pitching picks. Like they tend to do pretty well in that regard. Mason Molina is the one name that really had some actual hype coming into the draft that the Brewers took on this day two. Lefty out of Arkansas. Seemed like he was a little out of shape. He got up to 230 pounds. He didn't carry it super well, but he's got a good changeup. His fastball is, again, it's only in the low 90s. It'll get up to 95, but it's got really good life. It works well at the top of the zone. Throws a slider and a curveball as well. It's a starter's repertoire. He's got the build to be a starter. I think there's a pretty good chance he will, but the command's going to have to get better or he might end up in the pen. The next pick was another lefty out of Oklahoma State, Sam Garcia, another guy, not a ton out there on him, but I watched him a couple times this year because I was watching Oklahoma State for Carson Benj, who I liked a decent amount at that 17th pick. Ended up going at 19 to the Mets, but Garcia is in the low 90s. He's got a really low arm slot, comes almost sidearm at times. So the fastball plays pretty well just because of that. Slider spins decently, doesn't have a great shape. I think he could improve it. I think he's just got to find a little bit better release on it because it does spin it pretty well. And the changeup showed some flashes as well. The command is okay. He didn't walk hardly anyone this year. His strikeout to walk ratio this year was 115 to 19, which is really, really good. So he's somebody I'll watch. He kind of reminds me of some of their picks last year who I was not super sold on because of the stuff. And then the Brewers just tinker with them a little bit and find something that works. And all of a sudden they're all interesting prospects. So I trust them for the most part. They tend to know what they're doing. And then they finished the day off with a couple high schoolers. And that was a little surprising to me. I thought they were going to wait till day 3 at that point, but they ended up going with 2 Midwest high schoolers, one of them from Indiana, Griffin Tobias. He's going to be an overslot, I would have to think. He's got good release height on his fastballs. He throws a four-seam, a cutter, and a sinker. So, again, Brewers type 100%, except this time in a high schooler. The sinker has a ton of movement arm side. It's been up to 93. He's actually touched 95 in games, but on the data we had, it was only 93. His cutter is in the upper 80s with a decent shape as well. Sweeper looks really good, 20 inches of horizontal break, really good shape, upper 70s. I like this pick a lot. This is kind of the Brewers' sweet spot lately. They love these Midwest prep players. Ginger Polson is the area scout for the Midwest. She has signed Luke Adams, Bishop Letson, Josh Adamszewski, Craig Yoho as a college player. She was on him. She's hit on a ton of players lately. She's been really, really good. And shout out to her because I think the Brewers seem to trust her quite a bit. And we'll see in day 3, a lot of these prep guys that they end up taking in day 3 are Midwest players too. So I think she might be like their go-to for these under the radar players right now. And it's hard to blame them if it is because her hit rate has been unbelievable so far. Like these are guys who are top 10 to 15 prospects and a year or 2 years ago were being drafted on day 3 out of high school. So that's really impressive. And yeah, like I said, you'll see it even more when we get to day 3, but the last pick of day 2 is another Midwest prep kid out of Illinois, Ethan Dorchis, low 90s fastball. He's 6'6", so he's got a ton of room to grow. He's very skinny. It's a low release height for his overall height and a low slot. His secondaries are, to me, it's a sweeper. It's called a curve, but it has a sweeper shape and a splitter, which is, I would just note, kind of rare for the Brewers. I think they only have one pitcher currently in the organization who throws a splitter. That's Tanner Shears, and it's actually been a pretty popular pitch around baseball lately. So the Brewers, they tend to when the league zigs, the Brewers zag most of the time. So I just found it interesting that they actually did pick somebody with a splitter because they really have not had anybody with splitters in their org lately. But yeah, that was day two. Day three, Gunnar, unfortunately, we don't have too many bats to look at. Um, if you want to, while I'm talking though, you could look up the two bats that are on here and give me your thoughts on them when we get to them. Um, there's only two. One of them's a pretty big prospect. You'll probably like him quite a bit. I'm not sure they'll sign him, but I'll talk about him when we get there. And then the other one, you can probably find some Twitter video or something of. But I'll kick it off with Cademan Parker, right-handed pitcher out of TCU. Pretty good stuff. He was actually a pretty big sign or a pretty big high school prospect coming into the draft. He was ranked around 200 by Baseball America as a high schooler. He was viewed as a tough sign. He did not get drafted because of that. He pitched as both a starter and a reliever for TCU. He missed 2023 due to Tommy John, but he throws up to 97 with his fastball. It's got some cut on it. It sits more like 93 to 95, but it's a powerful pitch. Like it gets on guys well. He gets pretty good extension with a really big, like a chopping type of delivery. It's interesting to watch. The slider was classified as a cutter at the combine, but it looks more like a short slider to me. He also throws a changeup with a little bit of arm side run. It looks okay. His curveball spun up to 2,800 RPMs at the combine. Pretty good movement. The slider and the slider and the curveball are probably his two best pitches, but the fastball really jumps on people. So I think he's probably a reliever, but he has started, and the Brewers tend to go after guys who teams might view them as relievers, and the Brewers think they can start. And like Brett Witrowski, who was a day three guy last year, he's already in Double A, and he's by some measures a top 15 prospect in the organization. So I won't doubt him on their pitching. Like I said, the 12th round pick, don't know much on Tyson Harden. I don't think there's a ton out there. He was a closer or a reliever most of the time for Mississippi State. Former JUCO guy, up to 97 with his fastball with a ton of movement. I retweeted a video that was ridiculous to watch against Florida. He threw a pitch 97 that looked like it was going to be outside and ended up almost inside, up and in on the hitter. It was a ridiculous pitch. His other pitch is a slider. There's really not much info on it. Command seems to be a bit of an issue. He didn't get that many swing and misses at Mississippi State for a guy with that type of stuff. This will probably be a pretty cheap signing. But you know what I should touch on quickly? Day three signings. So the first 10 rounds, every dollar you pay somebody counts towards the bonus pool. On day three, the first $150,000 towards any player. So like the round 11 pick, if he got $150,000 exactly, none of that money would go into the bonus pool. If you got $160,000 exactly, $10,000 would go against the bonus pool. So the Brewers get a little bit extra, basically free money towards their pool, which is why I thought they would wait for the prep players here, because it basically chips off 150,000 of what they're taking out of their pool every time they sign somebody here. The 13th round pick, I think, is where that's going to come in. Very important. Joey Broughton, I want to say. Brofton. Lots of ways that could be pronounced. I'm not sure how you say it. Lefty from Michigan. Huge riser on boards. Somebody I'd heard of but hadn't paid much attention to. He's a pit commit. He's up to 95 miles per hour from the left side, up to 24.4 inches of induced vertical break, which is genuinely insane. Like there's almost nobody in baseball who can get to that level. It's a low release height. He's 6'2". His fastball spins at 2,700. The fastball could be a monster pitch. His curve is close to 3,000 RPMs, and it gets good movement as well. Changeup has good fade. To me, like this is by far the most important signing outside of the day one guys. Like the Brewers need to bring him into the organization. This could be a really, really good pitching prospect. The exact type of guy that they do well with. And being a pit commit, I don't think he's going to be the hardest guy to sign. That's not like a Wake Forest commit or an LSU commit or guys like that. Like Pitt doesn't have NIL money to throw at you. Pitt doesn't have the same level of appeal. This is a guy from Michigan. It's not like he's from the area either. So he has specific ties to the school. Really, really hoping they can sign him. And I have decent faith that they will. But that'll bring us to our next hitter, James Nunnally. This is a guy who I would be pretty surprised if they can sign him. This is somebody who's been up to ESPN had him as the 52nd ranked player in the entire draft. So getting him in the 14th round and signing him would be an absolute, I mean, that would be a steal of any, however you slice it, that would be a ridiculous job by the Brewers to be able to get him. I would be shocked if they do. He is a catcher. Again, they drafted him as a catcher. Very good athlete. I think he could play center field if he moves out from behind the plate. Um, I'm going to assume he's unsignable, so I don't get my hopes up too much here. But the 14th round is a little early for the Brewers to take flyers on a guy that they really don't think they're going to sign. So I think there's a chance. And Gunnar, I don't know if you were able to find any video on him, but
I
what
watched
are
a
your
little bit, yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the swing is really, really nice too. It's flat, with a little bit of an upward path to it too, but it just looks really repeatable again, very smooth. I think I saw MLB.com had him 200th ranked, but again, I don't know when they posted that, whatever. Either way, he's picked up 400 something here, so it's sliced in half, obviously. Virginia commit. So yeah, coming out of high school, it's going to be a hard sell for him to bring him here, obviously, but like you said, that's why you do stuff earlier in the draft, so then you can put yourself in a good position to maybe get him here. But um, also, I mean, the fact that we had so many pitchers get rifled off here too for a while, and then this is our one hitter that we come back with seems a little surprising in that sense too. So to me, that feels like a little bit of confidence that they could bring him in, but because you didn't really take another chance, another hitter here then. But yeah, he looks exciting. Obviously, it looks like they gave him a 55 hit. 40 power, 45 run, 45 arm, 45 field, and then whatever overall 40 doesn't really matter. But the hit, it does seem like he's just going to be a good hitter overall. It looks very repeatable. I saw some catcher stuff on him in some of the videos. It looked okay. It's high school. I don't know. You can't really tell always, but
It's more the arm for him, I think, at
yeah,
catcher. Glove wise, I think he'll hold up, but he doesn't have a great arm.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah, it
noticed.
looks like Fangraphs had him 98th. Prospects Live had him 157. Perfect Game had him 135. So he did pretty well on some of these boards. Baseball America did have him 322. So wide ranging thoughts on him, but up to 52 and a couple top 100s and some other people pretty close to 100. It's a pretty good prospect. And this is how baseball boards work. Like, other than the top 50 names, you're going to see guys who have just a wide ranging amount of opinions on them. But the fact that some people view him that highly says a lot, in my opinion. But he is going to be a tough sign from Virginia. Virginia does well with getting their guys to campus. I think, no inside info or anything, I think there's a chance the Brewers take a guy like this just to try and hedge their bets in case they miss out on one of their day two or even day one picks somehow. Um, Now that would not be like the first or second round picks, like that's or the first two picks. Like, they're gonna sign those guys, but the prep arms throughout day one and two, you never know. Kids can have a change of mind. Like, they might have told you, yeah, we're gonna sign, change of heart, I should say, but yeah, we're gonna sign for this number, and then I don't know, I really want to go to blank, and I'm not sure I'll sign now, and you lose that slot money. I should point out, if you don't sign somebody in the top 10 rounds, you don't get that slot money anymore. It's gone. But because you were saving money for other things, you still might have enough left over to maybe throw a big offer at Nunnally because you missed out on that other player and say, hey, we're going to try and get him instead. You never know if that was the plan, but if they are able to bring all of those guys in, including Nunnally, like, that would be a ridiculous haul. I'm a big fan of him. Like, I think he's going to be pretty good. But again, I'm not sure he's a catcher long term. 15th round pick, Travis Smith out of Kentucky. He's committed to Mississippi State as a transfer, which to me is a little bit of a red flag that he's going to be tough to sign. Fastball's up to 97 with a good amount of run. He's got a high spin slider, gets kind of cutterish at times, changeup and a slower curve. He's been out of the pen a little bit more. It's kind of a starter's profile. He was a big high school prospect as well, and somebody that people thought was going to do really well once he got on campus. He also had Tommy John, so it's kind of a similar story to the pick before, the 11th round pick, Cademan Parker. So it's kind of that type of profile again, but this one has a little bit more leverage in his talks because he is going to Mississippi State next year if he doesn't end up signing. The next pick, honestly, is the one I have the least on because I'm almost certain he's not going to sign. Jaden Dubanuix, I believe is how it's pronounced. Maybe he's committed to Florida. According to his Twitter, he is already living on campus at this point. I just can't imagine he's going to sign. He's another like lanky, really skinny guy who has some height to him, has a low 90s fastball already up to 93, decent decent spin on his pitches, slider and a changeup. Interesting arm, but I'm just not even really considering him a very good possibility to sign. 17th rounder, we got one more position player for Gunner here. Not sure if you were able to find much on Cooper Malamazian, but this is another prep high schooler, unsurprisingly. Illinois, Nazareth Academy. He's a shortstop. He's committed to Indiana. I saw some stuff on Twitter regarding his max exit velo is 99.3, but he's got bat speed of up to 76 already, or averaging 76 in his BP already, which is a really good place to be. I think somebody who's going to add power kind of reminds me of Jay Savina's profile when they drafted him a couple years ago. Avina got traded for Jake Bowers, for those who don't remember, but Avina was having a bit of a breakout in the Brewers system, and it was mostly power. So I think it's a guy who's going to hit for some pop as he gets going. But Gunnar, sure you were able to find some of that video. What did you think of the swing at first glance?
It was solid. I was going to point out more what you literally just said because I was looking at those numbers and yeah, I thought when you look at the bat speed plus like the average exit velocity, it feels pretty high. And then distance wise, I mean, it was like a track man or something, but he's only like 340, but he's hitting the ball hard. So it seems like to me, just based off of those numbers and the little swing that I saw, it's like okay, he's the typical high schooler who hasn't totally figured out his swing and what his power is like, is what his body's like, but as he gets older and actually gets stronger, I think that's when you start seeing the power. And we talk about what the Brewers do all the time. That seems like what they really do with these hitters, like the guys who have the tools and have the potential to do that, but they already bring everything else that you can't really easily teach as long as
Mhm.
they've got that within themselves hitting wise and the capability to get to the power. Um, that's what they play well with too. So yeah, like you said, it's not easy to get excited about it because it seems like he's not even gonna be able to come here anyways. But you kind of answered the question too already at one point. But my question to you before we even started to answer it a little bit was going to be like, to me, the dumb take is like, what's the point to even go out and like try to draft a guy like this if you feel like he's not going to come? Like you said, you lose the money anyway, so it's not like a huge like, oh, if we don't get him, we can throw it at somebody else. Like, what's the benefit, I guess? I mean, outside of high risk, low reward, I guess, because it's later in the draft. But like, why do it? Why take a chance on a guy like this if he's most likely going to leave anyways?
Yeah. So I will say with Malamazian, I think there's a decent chance he signs. It's another Big Ten commit. Big Ten commits are just not very. It's not that great a baseball conference, and they tend to be easier to sign, which is I think why the Brewers have gone after a lot of them. Like I said, Luke Adams was a Michigan State commit. Bishop Letson was Purdue. Josh Adamszewski was an Illinois or an Indiana commit, I should say. No, he was Ball State actually. Either way, a lot of these smaller schools are a little bit easier to sign people away from because they just don't have NIL to throw at them. They don't have the appeal of like, oh, we're going to be playing for a national championship, that type of stuff. So why not get your career started? But in terms of like, I'll just give an example. So let's say, um, who's the easiest example here? Let's say Message. The Brewers are planning to sign. I should pull up the slot values here, but the Brewers are trying to sign Message to an over slot deal, right? So they're gonna go. I gotta have it up before I give a number, but I believe his number's probably gonna be pretty close to like 1.5 million in pick value, if I had to guess. I'm almost there. Um, Message is, yeah, 1.56 million. Pretty good off the top of my head. Um, so let's say the Brewers were going to, and this isn't the best example because this is a lot of slot value money to lose, but let's say they were going to offer him $2 million, right? He doesn't sign. They do lose the 1.56 million, but let's assume they saved at least 500,000 more on all these other signings. They can still throw the extra 500,000 at a guy like Nunnally or these other high schoolers to try and save face a little bit. And again, they get 150,000 that counts towards that without going into their bonus pool as well. So If they had exactly 500,000 left over, they would have 650,000 to throw at any player they want, or they could split it up however they want to do it. But that's why they do it. It's kind of built-in insurance. My guess is they know what it takes to sign a guy like Nunnally, and they're saying, well, if things go poorly, we might actually have that type of money available. Um, the other thing is the day two guys, other than the eighth and or the ninth and 10th rounders, I think most of those guys are going to sign for way under slot. Like I could see three or four of them taking the $10,000 minimum bonus because they're all seniors who have no leverage, and the Brewers can kind of use that not against them, but to the Brewers' advantage and save a bunch of money in that way. I don't know how much money they have coming into this, but I've been under the assumption they have a decent amount to work with on day three. Um, but we'll finish. We got three more high school arms to finish off with. Again, they went out to New Jersey. It seems like they like to stick in the Midwest or in the Northeast. I guess they went to New York on this one. Tyler Renz. This is a guy that I know scouts in the Northeast have had like they're big fans of, and he's another 17-year-old. Analytically inclined teams were thought to be tied to him the entire time. He's 6'4". He's got really good spin characteristics. Again, 17 years old, like that fits all the models. Um, it's an upper 80s, low 90s fastball right now, but I think he's got a lot more in the tank. It gets a lot more whiffs than you would expect already. He's got a slider and a curveball that have potential. They get a little slurvy at times, but even then it has a pretty good amount of movement. And he's occasionally thrown a changeup as well, which he takes a decent amount of velo off, but it's not a great shape. This is a guy that like I said, scouts really like him. He did really well against good competition in like the area code games, um, in on the circuit for the summer. Like he just performed well against good hitters. So again, this is a St. John's commit, somebody that probably isn't as big a dream school for a lot of teams, although or a lot of players, but he is from that area. My guess is he's again an insurance policy. You never know, but that would be where I would probably point to him going. I think he's one of the guys that they're hoping they can sign if things go poorly elsewhere, but not expecting to sign if things go to plan. 19th rounder is a fun one. Manitowoc Lutheran kid from Wisconsin, Noah Wetch. I actually was looking into him and I thought he'd be a perfect Brewers third day three pick. I had some notes on him that I posted on Twitter, but really, really quick arm, like really fast arm. He's been up to 96 already with good induced vertical break up to 20 inches. It really, on average, it's 20 inches. I think he's been up to 22. He works really well at the top of the zone. He knows how to get up there. He also has a ton of extension, up to 7.3 feet of extension, which is ridiculous. The slider is firm. It's got some sweep. It's got a bit of tilt. It's generally in that 82 to 85 range. A lot of spin on it. He throws a curve that has more depth to it in the mid to upper 70s, still developing, and a changeup that needs a lot of work. Really not a pitch he can use right now. It's definitely not an effortless delivery, but he's shown good feel for the zone. He has a good finish to his pitch. Like I said, it's a lot of extension. It's a really loose arm, fast arm, strong traits. There's definitely a reliever risk here, but the fastball shape is really good, and he's an Oklahoma State commit. He'll only be a few months older than 18, or he is only a few months older than 18. I think the hope here is that they get a bit of a hometown discount. I think Oklahoma State commits are often pretty hard to sign. It's unlikely he would sign with anybody else. I guess you never know. The Brewers might have enough to throw at him to say, hey, who knows if he's even a Brewer fan, but assuming he is, like the opportunity to potentially play for the hometown team might be enough to get him to sign. But definitely not going to be cheap. And then the final pick of the draft, Henry Brummel, another, and I should point out, given Wetch is from Manitowoc, another Midwest prep arm and another Ginger Polson person here. Henry Brummel out of Illinois. So again, Midwest once more. He's committed to Indiana as well. So Indiana is hoping the Brewers do not sign all these people because the Brewers are probably taking some of their best commits right now if they sign all of them. 6'4", pitched in the upper 80s. He's gotten up to 90, 91 in 2023, but this year he was able to get into that 94 range, 95 a couple times. Really good spin, potential to get to a really good breaking ball. It's got good shape, but it shows a little bit of inconsistency right now. Also a low 80s changeup with a decent shape. He's got a pretty violent delivery, and there's a lot of control issues at the moment. But the stuff is good. The arm speed is really good. Like I said, an Indiana commit. I think there's a chance this is a guy that might go for less than you would expect at this point in the draft, but the stuff is good. I think the command is always going to give him a little bit of a. He's the type of guy who could go to college and struggle and not end up getting drafted. So if people are advising him, I could see them telling him, like, hey, this might be your best chance to get into pro ball, work with professional coaches, and maybe hammer out some of those issues with your delivery right away and give you the best chance to actually succeed. So you never know, but that's where it ended up going. And this means out of the 22 picks the Brewers had in this draft, there was a total of 5 hitters, 17 pitchers. The Brewers drafted 13 high schoolers, which was the most, I believe, in the league this year. Only 122 high schoolers were drafted overall. So the Brewers drafted over 10% of the high schoolers picked. I don't think they're going to sign all of them. I would be absolutely floored if they do, but I think there's a pretty good chance they sign more than half. And if they do, any of those high school guys in day 3 are going to be nice pickups. I think if you have to rank them, like for me, it's going to be Broughton or Brofton or however it's pronounced. That to me is the number one goal they should have. James Nunnally seems unrealistic, but he would be absolutely fantastic. You've got I like the Malamazian guy. Like I'm hoping they can sign him. Um, Position players tend to be a little bit cheaper on day 3 than pitchers do. So especially ones who are like again not committed to Virginia and are committed to Indiana instead. So it's gonna be super interesting. The draft as a whole kind of relies on them having a good day 3 here and signing a decent amount of them. Because if they don't, then they're probably gonna have a lot of extra money that they didn't use, and they're also going to have less talent than I would have expected them to walk out of. Like after day 2, I was a little bit confused. After seeing how they attacked day 3, I think it makes a lot more sense. But this is not going to be the 2023 draft. I don't think you'll ever see one like that again. The Brewers had the best combination you could possibly have last year. They had a ton of extra bonus money again. They had one of the best drafts in general, like draft class wise. The 2023 class had a great prep class and a great college class. That rarely happens. And then the Brewers had everything kind of fall into place for them as well. So I don't think you'll ever see a draft that good again. If you compare any draft to that, you're probably going to be disappointed. If they can sign a good chunk of these day 3 guys, I think this was another really, really solid draft by the Brewers. But now that I've talked for approximately 40 minutes on my own, other than a couple drop ins where I let Gunnar get a few words in, we're going to move on to questions for the crew. We'll start off with just a pretty simple one. And honestly, we kind of already talked about this at the beginning, but what's your level of confidence that this Brewers team, as currently constructed, is a playoff team?
Yeah, mine's pretty high, honestly. We talked about the division wise, why maybe because we're all close, that can maybe hamper it depending on how hot or how not hot we are. If we're like a 500 team this rest of the way, which seems very, very doable for us, but also you're putting yourself in a little bit of a tough spot. Um, I think you still would have a chance even in that scenario, and I think we're better than that. To me, it just comes down to I'll keep it to this because it was as currently constructed. It's the youth for me and just how guys react to a full season. A lot of these guys, to me, haven't even really broken through. We've seen stretches of them breaking through, like literally all the young guys possible. Sal's starting to heat up a little bit. I mentioned Garrett coming back. We still literally have no idea what he is at all. I love him, but maybe he's horrible still. I don't know. Odds are he might be bad, but it's like we don't know who a lot of these guys are still. Jackson Cheerios had a really good stretch here. I guess if you go, you can probably take that back a couple of months even, and the numbers probably look pretty solid. So it's guys being on individually. I think guys are starting to figure it out, even though team wise it seems like there's slumping a little bit here as far as wins and losses go. But when I'm just looking at the young guys, there's just so many wild cards, but also like we have yet to see the best of them still consistently. And I'm excited to see that. And I think there's just a lot of opportunity and we're still winning when the opportunity was trying to figure it out and what's going to happen in the first half. And we were still 14 games over 500 or whatever it is. And we're in a good spot. So, now that we know who we are, people know that we're good. We can't really surprise anybody anymore. That's when the expectations are going to start to set in. And It's just how they respond, how the young guys respond, and can they keep it up, or can they actually just be solid for the rest of the year? And we're going to be in super good shape if they are. So, yeah, I think if I had to put odds on it, like I would bet like 90% sure they're going to make the playoffs. But again, what does that mean? I don't know. But I just feel pretty confident. How do you think? You think they're going to make the playoffs? And then you could just tie it into the next question too here
Yeah.
is if there's any moves to be made, what would maybe be those moves that we got to make if we're to give ourselves a better chance to make the playoffs too?
Yeah, I think as currently constructed, I'm confident that they will make the playoffs. I would have concerns once they get to the playoffs a little bit more with this current team. And the reason for that is how I'm going to answer the second part of that, which is the number one thing I think they need to improve is just adding legitimately impactful pitching. It doesn't have to be a starter necessarily, but I would prefer it would be. But somebody who does things well. I mean, it only has to be two times through the order where you kind of dominate. Like a guy like, and we talked about him before, but I doubt he's going to be available now that the Mets are actually in the playoffs as of this moment. Luis Severino has been absolutely dominant through two times through the order. He has not done well a third time through, and it's tanked his numbers overall. But he's the type of guy who, in a playoff series, like you get him through twice, and you get a bunch of strikeouts, and you just have really solid pitching for two times through. That helps you so much more than having to rely on Colin Ray not having like a bad outing. And again, that is not a knock on Colin Ray at all. Like I love Colin Ray, but that's what it is to me. It's something where you add somebody who can make a legitimately impactful. That's not going to make any sense, but an impactful impact on the on a playoff game as a pitcher, and I would prefer it to be a starter. I don't know, Gunnar, do you have any different thoughts on somebody you think or a spot that you think they should add or really is there somebody like maybe you think they should subtract somebody from the roster and it would help the team, like anybody or anything that you think they should change?
I'm not so it's not really subtracting like a specific player that's really ruining our chances right now, especially in baseball. It's kind of hard to do
Yeah.
unless you're like a starting pitcher that we're just like Bryce Wilson, where we're like get this guy out of the rotation. It's literally hurting us. And then you by making additions, you're subtracting, I guess, in that sense, but putting him in a better spot. I mean, the guy that we got obviously was Aaron. With that trade, I think if we just get another guy like that, I would be pretty confident in just another guy like you basically what you just said. It's a guy who can just give us two rounds to the order solid, and you just don't have to worry about it. With maybe even a little bit higher upside. Like, I mean, he's got to me, I think he could be better than what he is, and um, or what he's shown, I guess, in the big league so far. He's got. I saw somebody post. Is it like FIP or something? I know you guys use that a lot, but is that show like defense? Like it takes into account to everything that they've got like behind them even too a little bit. Like
For pitchers,
yeah.
it's fielding independent pitching, so it takes out all of the defense. It's like
Okay. Yeah.
what
So
would
it's the
happen if
inverse of
defense was
that.
so it's
Yeah.
basically strikeouts, walks, and homers that factor in the most.
Right. So then he was doing good in that, which means that his defense usually wasn't as good as it is now. So just guys like that where you can really like bolster what they've gotten, but really around the league they're not like amazingly viewed. And then I joked too at the beginning of the year when Devin Williams got hurt that we would be in this position and saying, "Oh, it's a great trade acquisition if you get Devin Williams," and then we do get it back. So that'll push somebody out. Like I said, DL Hall is coming back. Um, and along the lines of just like the young hitters that we've got, I don't know what type of hitter it is. I don't think it has to be a great one. I don't think it necessarily needs to even like need one because if you look at our roster, we're like pretty stacked up anyways. So it's like, where would you even fit one in? It just doesn't feel like, and the way we finish this questions for the crew, I'll elaborate on maybe some of this, but some of the guys have to be a little bit better too that we've already gotten. So maybe that makes it feel better if the guys that we expect to hit start hitting a little bit better. It just doesn't feel great right now offensively, just from how we could be better at that. But I think we've got the guys still, and it's just cleaning it up around the edges that I think would actually just make us feel a lot more safe. And um, I am scared. We had this conversation a couple episodes ago, and just like what you just said, where playoff rotation wise, like is this group like the guys that we have right now are going to be good enough when you go into the playoffs? If you got Freddie, let's say Aaron and Colin Ray, like is that solid enough for top three guys that if you're going with that? I think it's solid enough, but then you're also relying on Freddie like taking a little bit of a turn. You're relying on Colin Ray to at least still be a little bit more solid than he has been, but he's been solid. So I don't know. Maybe you get one more guy in there to make me feel better, who's got a little bit more of a repertoire to like. I feel a lot better with him out there,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, I just don't know an exact name. But
Yeah. I think we can finish this one off then with kind of just it's really four questions and just some names. I purposely didn't pick the same as you, though I think I probably would have picked the same on a couple of them, but
Mhm.
um we'll kick it off with going into the second half, who will be the most likely to have the greatest impact on the team as a whole?
I left the other name for you because I know you'd pick him and you would be more excited to talk about him. But I think William Contreras is, I'll make my argument for him because when he was just soaring at the beginning of this season, which we saw him be really good last year, obviously, too, he's just was like solid all year long, like a really, really good hitter, but not like what he was to start this year. But you saw the impact that he had when he was like a 950 OPS guy in our order, paired with the guy that you'll be talking about, like. I maybe because I more expect the other guy that where you'll be talking about to be solid, and he always has been solid. But when you add somebody else to that, like William Contreras, um, I think the impact that he'll have on the rest of the lineup is going to be really, really good. And the type of hitter that he is too. I think he just does a lot of good things overall as a hitter when he is going well. Obviously, he's gotten a little bit better here, I guess, but technically he's still probably on a decline from where he was,
Oh
obviously.
yeah.
So um, I feel it's going to answer sort of another question that we have later for this part, where like I think he's going to have the greatest impact because he's going to turn it around almost too. So um, I just don't see him continuing going on a decline, which almost makes this answer pretty obvious for me. Like he's going to be good, like he's a good
Yeah.
hitter and he's going to turn it around, so he's going to have a good impact. But who was the other guy who you picked? Because it's probably pretty obvious now.
Yeah, I mean, my actual pick would have been Contreras. Honestly, I think just because at catcher as well, he needs to improve a little bit.
Yeah,
So I think
true.
either way, he could have a bigger impact, positive or negative, than Yelich can. Um, but Yelich is my answer, mostly because I just really do think that he is, if healthy, going to continue hitting. Like everything points to a guy who has figured things out again. I am so afraid to say that because I just know it's gonna come back to me. But like it's so hard to ignore. I mean, I saw an interview of him, I believe it was with Cameron Maben yesterday at the All-Star game thing. And I remember a couple years ago talking, really the beginning of last season, hearing him talk, and he just sounded broken. And we talked about it a lot, Gunner. We didn't have this podcast at the time, but how he sounded like a guy who just lost all of the confidence in the world, a guy who was putting way too much pressure on himself. And he finally like let go of that in May of last year. And since that point, he's been like a top 15 hitter in baseball. Like mid-May last year, he's been basically a top 15 hitter in baseball. And this interview he was doing, he was just talking about how like this is how it works, man. Like I figured out this is not how I had to change things, and I wasn't going to be the same guy I was before, which ironically in the first half he's been almost to the level of like he's been 2018 Yelich, if not a little bit better to this point. Um, 2019 Yelich was a different animal, and those balls were juiced, and it was all going his way that year. But he's been a very very good player this year, and he just sounds like a guy who finally accepted that you don't have to live up to this MVP type of performance. And ironically, him finally letting go of that hope is what's helped him kind of get back to that type of player. So um, I just think he can carry an offense. We've seen him carry an offense at times. So if it's not Contreras, it's got to be Yelich for me. But you touched on the next question here, which is most likely to turn it around in the second half. Who do you got for that?
This guy just has to. Like, I don't see a world where he, one, doesn't, but also we just need him to turn it around, period, is Rhys Hoskins. Um, he's almost down to like a low 700s OPS now. Like, that's looking at like Andrew McCutchen when he was with the Brewers, where it's like, okay, it's okay, but we got you to be the middle of the order bat with power and um, be our answer at third base when we haven't really had one for a little bit here. So, like I said, I expect him to. I think he will. Even so, like, too, I don't feel hopeless when he's up there necessarily right now. Like, he hasn't looked great, but also at the same time, I just don't feel like it's like he's too far off. Like the swing still feels fine to me. It feels more like just indecisiveness almost, or I don't know. He's just in a weird baseball funk for me. So maybe the break came at a good time for him. He came off that injury, and obviously not really a great excuse for him because he did have a good start off with that injury, and then he just like took a big downward slide after
Hmm.
that. So. Um, he almost could be the answer to the first question too, just for the same reason of like if he turns it around like you expect him to, like that could just be a whole new aspect of this offense that we haven't even
Yeah.
really gotten to see yet. So um we this lineup does need a little bit more power, and he's the one guy who's going to bring it if he can bring it. So um hopefully he gets super hot here in this 2 month stretch, and he's obviously we've seen him be a playoff player too. So
Hmm.
he's ready for that moment. So he just needs to get hot at the right time, and maybe he's just been saving it. But I do expect him to turn around. If I had to put money on it, I'd probably put my money on Rhys Hoskins. But I did think about the guy that you were going to pick too as well, because sort of the same thing is we need this guy to step up for
Yeah.
the same sort of reason, but in a different part of the game here. So who'd you pick?
Yeah, I went with Freddie. I think not only do I think he's going to, but like you said, I think it's very important that he does. He had a very good second half last year, after a bit of a disappointing first half. So we've seen it happen before. I think he was finishing the first half on a pretty high note, and I would say the same for Reese, honestly. Reese started hitting the ball a bit better, down the stretch there. He had a few homers in the last couple of weeks, but for Freddie, his last like 4 or 5 starts were a lot better. They weren't all perfect. It never will be with him. He's always got the capability to kind of blow up a little bit on any given night. But he showed an ability to fight through struggles better recently. And that's the most important thing I think you need to see from him. I think he's going to have a good second half. I believe in the stuff. I believe in him as a pitcher. I just think it's coming. On the other side of things, Gunnar, who do you see as most likely to kind of fall off from where they were in the first half?
Not totally because I believe it, but I think mostly because he put himself in this own position of you've been playing so well for this part of the year that it just can't be this great and sunshine and rainbows all the time with you. And I picked Brian Hudson for that reason. So don't think I'm just trying to crap on the guy, but he's just been really, really good so far. Really, if you take away, I think it was that Dodgers series, right? He had the two
Yep.
back-to-back appearances that were iffy. And one maybe not even his fault. I don't know why he pitched in it, but um, like take those away, he's probably a sub 1 ERA.
Yeah.
Should be in the All-Star game. He should be in the All-Star game anyways right now, if we're being honest. So I think some stuff, if you look at his numbers, you'll probably yell at me like and say I'm wrong, which is fine. I probably am. But if I were to make the argument that he was like maybe going to fall off, it seems like he doesn't get the chase, he doesn't get the whiffs, but he gets the strikeouts, and that's probably because of like obviously his stuff, his location,
Hmm.
the what are the extension that he gets. I know that's always incredible that he gets. So he's almost like a deceptive type of person in that sense. So he doesn't have to have like the perfect like
Yeah.
pitching layout like the normal way guys that get strikeouts is like by the chase and the whiffs, but he doesn't really need that. He just needs good location and deceptiveness, like I said. So even looking at his page now, like he doesn't have like great average exit velocity. So maybe if he's a little bit off his game, then he can maybe get a little bit good on him for this reason. Didn't think he'd be this good. So in that sense, I think he probably has to fall off a little bit. How much? I hope it's not much. It seems like it has to be a little bit, but yeah, that this it seems like if I had to make money or make a place a bet and I could get some money back, it'd probably be on that. So, who'd you pick?
Yeah, Hudson was definitely one I would consider. I think Jared Koenig as another name. I like both of them a lot, but
Hmm.
they've just been so good. Even Trevor McGill, honestly, I like all of those guys I like quite a bit, but they've pitched above what I think they really are as pitchers. I'm going with Terang here. That's not even meant as a knock. I think we've already seen him coming down to earth. His OPS plus is 104 now. Like this is a guy he's fallen off quite a bit offensively. I think you're still probably looking at a guy who finishes the year under 100 in WRC plus. Thing is, he's always going to bring the base running in the defense, and if the offense as a whole averages out to even close to league average, he's a good player. So I'm never going to complain about that. Um, and this is kind of cheating because again, I don't even know if he'll go down that much from where he is now. I think the fall off has already started, and in a lot of ways, it may have already happened. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of a cheap one. I think Another one I could see, like Joey Ortiz probably comes down in terms of numbers overall. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be really good long term for the Brewers, but he's outperformed some stuff. He is battling that neck thing. He's back now. Hopefully, this rest will help him out there. And his numbers did come down a bit during the stretch that he was standing with his whole body facing the pitcher because of the neck issue. So I'm not going to hurt him or ding him too much for that, but those are all guys that I could see it happening with. Um, we'll finish off here with our most likely to surprise us. And this answer does not surprise me at all, Gunner, but why don't you give it to me?
You took it with your answer the direction I wanted to take this one, even though the guy I picked isn't or super crazy. But I was thought about your guy because I think he'll be up. I thought about Tyler Black, but then I thought, well, he doesn't have the exact greatest window to be up. But I thought maybe a guy you would get surprised by because he's up and then maybe has a little bit of an impact. But a guy who is up and just came to the roster, someone I've been waiting for, Garrett Mitchell. If he's here, I'll make that very clear. He might get traded, and that's a very real possibility. But I think why I get excited by Garrett Mitchell is I think in probably not even like some of it's just delusion on my part. I don't totally understand that. Like all the numbers that if Spencer's going to contradict me here and yell at me, and I'll probably agree with him too. Like it's real. Like the scariness of his swing and his profile is definitely real, but. I just like that he's always been the higher exit velo type of hitter. He's got the tools to add some more power where you compare him to the guys like Sal, and I won't go on forever. We talked about it a million times, but like he's got a little bit different potential than what those guys have, but also could bring something similar. So if he can tap into the power, which is what I want him to do, if he never can, then yeah, I will take Sal Frelick every time. But I just think Garrett Mitchell having that power potential. Um, and this just stretch of the year, it seems like he could surprise us and hopefully catch a run and get hot. Like I said, I need to see the power. That's the biggest thing that can separate him from the other guys in the group. And definitely not strike out as much. Or please bring the power if you're going to strike out too. Like let's see
Yeah.
something different here. But his defense, although guess was a little bit shaky before the All-Star break and some of the stuff, but should be pretty solid too. I just think he could have a chance to have a big impact. And like I said, surprising us. The reason why I asked this question was because the guy you're not really expecting to do great, but you think that he can do great. So, yeah, I think there's a chance there for him. And like I said, there's a real chance that he gets traded too, because it also makes sense why he would be traded. So, um, yeah, who did you pick? Unless you want to yell at me about Garrett
I
first.
won't yell at you. I yell at you all the time about this.
True, true.
I no, I mean, I fully understand where you're coming from on Garrett. Like in terms of pure ceiling, it's up there with literally anybody in the organization, and I would say even Churio included in that. Like the guy can fly, plays good defense, he has power in him, but yeah, it's always going to be like heavy ground ball, heavy strikeout guys. Just I can't buy into them. His strikeouts have been fine since he came up. It's not terrible. He's whiffing a ton, which to me points to a guy who probably is going to start striking out a bit more. But he draws walks. Like I said, the speed is there, which means if you're on base, you can steal bases, you can do a lot of good things. Um, and the thing is, like, I love Garrett Mitchell because I enjoy how hard he plays. Like, I want the guy to do well. And I will say, Jarren Duran having a really good season for the Red Sox gives me some hope because he's kind of the guy that Mitchell reminds me of the most. Um, so it would not totally shock me if we see a really nice second half from Mitchell. It would not shock me if he's traded. It would not shock me if he's in Nashville in August. Like none of those scenarios would shock me. He's got one of the widest ranging outcomes, I think, of anybody on the roster, which is fun and also scary. So that's part of it. Like I don't think he's a bad prospect still, and he is still kind of a prospect. He really hasn't had that many major league at bats, but um that's just, and you know it. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but that's what always will scare me with him is there's just so much ability to just totally fall apart, and the profile scares me a lot. But mine is also a pretty risky guy here. Jacob Mizorowski. He has been dominating in Double A lately. He's been going 6+ innings the majority of the time, which is new for him. I mean, that's a big step up for him. The velo is holding up to 98 in the 6th inning, and he touched 98 in the 7th inning. The one time he got into the 7th, the breaking stuff looks disgusting right now. He looks really good. Don't think he's going to be starting for the Brewers, but I do think there's a very good chance he's in the bullpen. Um, Not too distant future either. I would not be surprised if it's like after the deadline you see Mizorowski in the Brewers bullpen, um, where I think there's like Mason Miller type of capabilities out of the pen, a guy who could just dominate in that role. So I think it wouldn't surprise a ton of people because everyone's asking for him to come up right now. But do think that the results he gets out of the pen might still surprise people because I think he could just dominate in that role. If he's throwing anywhere near enough strikes, I don't think many people will hit him. So that's my pick. We'll close things off here though, Gunnar, with our random Brewers. I think we both picked somewhat similar players in some ways here, but who'd you have? I will say, personal favorite of mine that you took here.
I tied this into, I don't know, when I was thinking of like our draft talk beforehand, right before, and you took it
Yeah.
the same way with the first baseman
Yep.
with Burke that we drafted. I was like, okay, who do we have a first baseman in our feet like distance that was lefty and like couldn't play anything else? Um, and then I chose Juan Francisco, who I'm shocked. I know we've talked about him. Maybe we have picked him before. We checked our numbers and our stats. We don't think we picked him, but he had a pretty solid run with us. I actually don't have his stats pulled up, but I think he had two stints with us up off my memory. He had one where small sample, but he played pretty well. And then I feel like he got a chance again, and then it was just really, really bad. And then I still see it up until like the last few years. I feel like I was seeing highlights of him in different leagues around the
Oh
league
yeah.
or the world, I guess I should say,
Yeah.
hitting home runs still. So I actually sort of did like his swing. Again, I was much more dumb back then, so I don't. If I saw it now, I'd probably be like, "That's yeah, that had a lot of holes in it, and that was just all or nothing there." But had a lot of good memories with him. Like I said, had some huge home runs. He's probably like up there with the leaderboards of like massive home runs for us. And that was also during the time of post Prince Fielder, where you're trying to find a first baseman. And I definitely 100% thought that we found him with Juan Francisco for at least a couple weeks there. So yeah, he had an arm sleeve. I remember that. I think it
Oh
was
yeah.
the what's the highlighter yellow? I don't know that color is
Neon.
called. Neon, yeah.
Yep.
Remember that. So had a lot of swag, had a lot of power.
Yeah.
You just can't hate a guy like that. So
No, no. Juan was awesome. 733 OPS. Only one season with the Brewers.
okay.
Split it between the Braves and the Brewers. He had a total of 18 homers, 13 with the Brewers that year. Um, yeah, decent. I mean, he took walks. He struck out a decent amount. He'd probably be more appreciated now, honestly. Terrible defensive player, though, so still probably would have a hard time finding a home. Um, but yeah, he hit nukes. I mean, he hit one out of Great American Ballpark over the right field bleachers when he was with
hmm
them. And yeah, just absolutely like light tower power. He was definitely playing in the Dominican Winter League. I think even this past winter. So he's still out there hitting bombs. He was only 26 in 2013. So yeah, he's a fun one. Mine really spent very little time with the Brewers. Justin Smoke. I was excited about that signing in 2020. Guy I wanted them to sign in the offseason. Did not work. He hit 5 homers. Um, Obviously, it was the COVID season. It was a weird season. 642 OPS. He got released, signed by the Giants for a few games, and then cut by them. And that was it. That was the end of his career. A guy who was an all-star in 2017, and had an 800 OPS in 2018. Like, I was pretty excited about that. 20 plus homers every year for the last 3 years coming into 2020, and just it did not work out. But alas, he was a fun guy. He seemed like a nice guy. We didn't get much interaction with him because, nobody was in the stadium while he played for the Brewers. But it Justin Smoke. I'm gonna start jumping into like the 2020 team and some of these random Brewers because some of those
Oh
guys
yeah.
are gonna be forgotten at this point. It's just such a
I was
weird
just thinking
season.
that, yeah, no one's like could connect with him. So
Yeah,
especially like Justin Smoke, who got released on top of it, it's just like you feel like he didn't even play for the Brewers because you never actually saw it in person.
right. Yeah. All right. Well, this is a long one. This is a really long one. Um, Thank you for listening and sticking around this whole time. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. Please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you sometime next week.
Go Crew.